My in-laws announced that the whole family was going on vacation without the kids. When my sister-in-law asked who would take care of them, my mother-in-law smirked and said, "Good question. Of course she will stay with the kids." I replied coldly, "I don't have kids, and yours aren't even obedient." That's when my mother-in-law snapped, slapped me across the face, and screamed, "How dare you speak like this about my grandchildren?" I turned to my husband, expecting him to defend me, but instead he shrugged and said, "You kinda deserved it. Should have just agreed in the first place." My sister-in-law smirked as she grabbed her luggage. "We'll be gone for a few weeks. Take good care, and remember, if anything happens to them, you're out of this house." I didn't reply, I just stared at them. And what I did next left every single one of them pale. I'm Jessica, 28, and I've been married to my husband Mark for 3 years. We live in his family's house, a massive Victorian that's been in the family for generations. It sounds fancy, but it's basically become a multi-generational nightmare where his mother Patricia rules with an iron fist, and everyone just goes along with whatever she says. The cast of characters: Patricia, mother-in-law, 58, Robert, father-in-law, 60, Mark, my husband, 30, his sister Amanda, 32, her husband Steve, 34, and their 3 kids, Tyler, 10, Madison, 8, and little Emma, 5. Amanda and Steve also live in the house with their kids, making it a crowded mess of 8 adults and 3 children under one roof. Now, before I dive into the main event, you need to understand the dynamic here. Patricia has always treated me like hired help rather than her son's wife. She expects me to cook, clean, and basically serve everyone while working my full-time job as a marketing coordinator. Amanda is Patricia's golden child who can do no wrong, and her kids, well, let's just say they're not exactly angels. They're spoiled, entitled, and have zero respect for boundaries or other people's belongings. I've tried talking to Mark about this countless times, but he always brushes me off with "That's just how mom is," or "You're being too sensitive." His spine is basically non-existent when it comes to his family. The incident that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in late July. We were all gathered in the living room after dinner when Patricia made her grand announcement. "Robert and I have decided to take the family on a cruise to the Caribbean," she said, beaming. "We leave Monday morning and we'll be gone for 2.5 weeks. It's going to be absolutely wonderful, just adults, no stress, pure relaxation." Amanda immediately got excited. "Oh my God, Mom, that sounds amazing. Steve and I haven't had a real vacation in years." That's when I noticed the glaring omission. "What about the kids?" I asked. Patricia's smile didn't waver. "Oh, they won't be coming. This is an adults-only vacation." Amanda suddenly looked concerned. "But Mom, who's going to watch them? We can't just leave them here alone." That's when Patricia turned to me with that sickeningly sweet smile I'd grown to hate. "Good question. Of course she will stay with the kids." She gestured toward me like I was some kind of given solution. I felt my blood pressure spike. After 3 years of being treated like the family servant, they just assumed I'd drop everything to babysit for nearly 3 weeks? I hadn't even been invited on this family vacation. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I have a job, Patricia. I can't just take 3 weeks off to babysit." "Oh, you can work it out," she waved dismissively. "Besides, you don't have kids of your own, so you have plenty of free time." That comment stung. Mark and I had been trying to have children for over a year, and Patricia knew this was a sensitive subject for me. The casualness with which she threw it in my face was breathtaking. "I don't have kids," I replied coldly, "and yours aren't even obedient." The room went dead silent. Tyler was currently jumping on the antique sofa with muddy shoes, Madison was pulling books off the shelf just to watch them fall, and Emma was drawing on the coffee table with a crayon. These weren't isolated incidents, this was typical behavior that nobody ever corrected. Patricia's face turned bright red. "How dare you?" she shrieked, jumping up from her chair. Before I could react, she had crossed the room and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the living room. "How dare you speak like this about my grandchildren?" My cheek was burning, and I was in complete shock. I immediately turned to Mark, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything. This was his wife who had just been assaulted by his mother. Instead, he shrugged. Actually shrugged. "You kinda deserved it, Jess. Should have just agreed in the first place." I felt something break inside me at that moment. Not just my heart, but something fundamental about how I saw my marriage and my place in this family. Amanda, who had been watching this whole scene unfold, suddenly smirked and grabbed her suitcase from behind the couch. Apparently, she'd already been packing. "We'll be gone for a few weeks. Take good care of them," she said sweetly. "And remember, if anything happens to them, you're out of this house." The threat was crystal clear. I was being blackmailed into compliance. "Watch our kids or lose your home." I didn't reply. I just stood there, staring at each of them in turn. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. Patricia looked smug and satisfied. Amanda was practically glowing with vindication. Robert, Steve, and the kids were acting like nothing unusual had happened. That's when I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that should have warned them they'd just made a catastrophic error in judgment. You know what? I said quietly. You're absolutely right. I'll take care of the kids. They all looked relieved, like they'd won some great victory. Patricia actually patted my arm condescendingly. I knew you'd come around, dear. They left Monday morning as planned, all smiles and excitement for their adults-only vacation. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the entire weekend making phone calls and setting up my own plan. The first call I made was to my boss, Sarah, explaining that I needed emergency time off due to a family crisis. She was understanding and approved 3 weeks of vacation time. The second call was to Amanda's ex-husband, David. Now, here's some backstory they probably should have considered before threatening me. Amanda had been married before Steve. Her first marriage was to David, Tyler's biological father. David was a good guy who'd been fighting for years to get more custody of his son, but Amanda had been blocking him at every turn with Patricia's full support. She'd poisoned Tyler against his father and made visitation as difficult as possible. David had been trying to reconnect with Tyler, but between Amanda's manipulation and Patricia's interference, he'd been limited to supervised visits once a month. He'd been working with a family lawyer to petition for more custody, but these things take time. When I called David and explained the situation, that Amanda had abandoned her children for a 3-week vacation and left them with someone who wasn't even family, someone who could be kicked out of the house at any time, he was very interested. My third call was to Steve's parents, Linda and George, who lived about 2 hours away. They'd been begging to spend more time with Madison and Emma, but Amanda had always found excuses to keep the kids away from them. Something about not wanting the kids to get confused by having too many grandparents around. Linda practically cried with joy when I told her I thought the girls needed to spend some quality time with their paternal grandparents while their parents were away. My fourth call was to my sister Rachel, who's a family law attorney. I explained the entire situation to her, including the physical assault, the threats, and the abandonment of the children. She was fascinated from a legal standpoint and agreed to help me document everything properly. By Sunday night, I had a plan that would solve several problems at once. Monday morning came, and the adults all left for their cruise, looking like the cats who'd swallow the canary. They were so pleased with themselves for putting me in my place and forcing me to comply with their demands. The moment their cab pulled away from the house, I got to work. First, I called David. Hey, it's Jessica. They're gone. Are you ready? He arrived within an hour with his lawyer and a court order he'd been working on for months. Technically, Amanda had abandoned Tyler by leaving him with a non-family member for an extended period while being unreachable. They turned off their phones for the vacation. This gave David grounds to petition for emergency custody. Tyler was initially resistant. Amanda had spent years telling him his father didn't love him. But David was patient and kind, and honestly, Tyler was starved for positive male attention since Steve barely acknowledged him. Within a few hours, Tyler was laughing and playing catch with his dad in the backyard. The paperwork was filed that afternoon. David would keep Tyler for the full 3 weeks, and they'd return to court when Amanda got back to sort out permanent custody arrangements. Tuesday morning, Linda and George arrived to pick up Madison and Emma. The girls were thrilled to see their grandparents, whom they barely knew thanks to Amanda's gatekeeping. Linda had tears in her eyes as she hugged them. "Are you sure Amanda won't mind?" she asked me nervously. "She left them in my care," I said truthfully. "I'm making the decisions that I think are best for the children. You're their grandparents, and they should know you." And just like that, the house was empty except for me. For the first time in 3 years, I had peace and quiet. No screaming children, no Patricia ordering me around, no Amanda making snide comments. Just me, in a big, beautiful house, with 3 weeks to think about my life. I spent the first few days just decompressing. I read books, took long baths, ordered takeout, and slept in until noon. It was glorious. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. You see, I'd been planning this moment for longer than I cared to admit. Not the specific revenge, but the escape. I'd been squirreling away money in a secret account for over a year, just in case things got bad enough that I needed to leave. Every time Patricia borrowed money from our household fund for her shopping sprees, every time Amanda expected me to pay for her kids' activities because you don't have children so you have more disposable income, I'd been documenting it and saving what I could. I'd also been building a support network they didn't know about. Remember how they always mocked me for my boring job in marketing? Well, that boring job had connected me with some very interesting people. My colleague Sarah had been through a nasty divorce and gave me the name of her attorney. My client Jennifer was a private investigator who specialized in family cases. My friend Lisa from the gym was a social worker who understood child welfare issues. These women had been watching my situation for months, offering support and advice when I needed it. They'd seen the bruises on my arms from the kids grabbing me, heard about the verbal abuse, and witnessed my gradual transformation from a confident professional to someone who flinched when her phone rang. Being alone in the house gave me access to things I'd never had before. Like Patricia's home office, where she kept all the family financial documents. And Amanda's room, where she kept her diary and other personal items. But first, let me tell you about those first few days of freedom. Because that's what it was, freedom. The first morning I woke up without Patricia banging on my bedroom door at 6 a.m. demanding I make breakfast for everyone was surreal. I actually slept until 9 a.m., something I hadn't done in 3 years. When I finally got up, I made myself a proper breakfast, eggs Benedict with fresh hollandaise sauce, something I'd never been able to make before because Patricia insisted breakfast had to be quick and simple for the children. I ate in the formal dining room, the one we were never allowed to use because the kids might spill something on the antique table. I used the good china, the spode set that had been Patricia's grandmother's, because why not? I was taking care of the house, after all. That afternoon, I did something I'd been wanting to do for years. I took a proper bath in the master bathroom's clawfoot tub. Patricia had always claimed that tub was too delicate for regular use and should only be used for special occasions. Well, my liberation felt pretty special to me. As I soaked in lavender-scented bubbles, sipping a glass of wine from Robert's precious collection, the one we were never supposed to touch, I started making mental notes of all the things I discovered about this house now that I could explore it freely. For instance, Patricia's bedroom closet was stuffed with shopping bags from high-end stores, still with tags attached. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars worth of clothes, shoes, and accessories that she'd never even worn. Meanwhile, she'd been complaining for months about how tight the household budget was and asking Mark and me to contribute more to groceries and utilities. Amanda's room was equally revealing. Hidden under her bed were credit card statements for accounts Steve clearly didn't know about. She'd been living way beyond their means, funding a lifestyle that included weekly spa treatments, expensive dinners, and shopping sprees that would make Patricia jealous. But the real treasure trove was Patricia's home office. See, Patricia prided herself on being the family financial manager. She handled all the household accounts, paid all the bills, and made all the major financial decisions. Mark and I dutifully deposited our contributions to the household fund into the account she controlled, trusting that she was using the money responsibly. She wasn't. The first thing I found was a folder labeled House Expenses that told a very different story than what we'd been led to believe. The mortgage on the house that was supposed to be paid off years ago, had been refinanced multiple times. Patricia had been taking out equity loans and using the house as collateral for credit lines. I photographed every document, every statement, every receipt. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been systematically draining the family's financial resources to fund her shopping addiction and maintain her image as the wealthy matriarch. But it got worse. Much worse. I found a life insurance policy on Mark that Patricia had taken out without his knowledge. She was the sole beneficiary, and the policy was worth $500,000. There were also documents suggesting she'd been forging Mark's signature on various financial documents. Then I found the gambling records. Patricia had been going to Atlantic City twice a month for spa weekends with her friend Dorothy. Except they weren't going to spas, they were going to casinos. And Patricia had been losing big. The credit card statements showed cash advances of thousands of dollars, all from casino ATMs. I sat in her leather chair, surrounded by evidence of years of financial fraud and deception, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, righteous anger. Not the helpless frustration I'd been living with, but clear, focused rage at the sheer audacity of this woman. She'd been stealing from her own family while treating me like garbage for not contributing enough. She'd been risking the family home, the home where her son and grandchildren lived, to feed her addictions to shopping and gambling. And she'd had the nerve to slap me and call me ungrateful. I spent the next 2 days methodically documenting everything. Jennifer, my private investigator friend, had given me a crash course in evidence gathering over lunch a few months earlier. If you ever need to build a case against someone, she'd said, documentation is everything. Photos, copies, dates, times, witnesses. I photographed bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, insurance policies, and receipts. I found Patricia's gambling membership cards for 3 different casinos. I discovered a second cell phone hidden in her desk drawer that contained texts with someone named Tony about payment schedules and interest rates. It looked like she'd borrowed money from a loan shark. Amanda's room yielded its own treasures. Her diary was just the beginning. I found hotel receipts for romantic getaways with Marcus that coincided with times she'd told Steve she was visiting her sick aunt in Philadelphia. There were receipts for expensive gifts, watches, jewelry, clothing, that she'd clearly bought for her boyfriend using family money. More damning were the legal documents I found hidden in her jewelry box. Amanda had been secretly consulting with a divorce attorney for months, plotting to leave Steve while maximizing her financial settlement. She'd been documenting his every minor flaw while hiding her own much more serious problems. The most chilling discovery was a handwritten plan detailing how she intended to claim Steve was an unfit father so she could get full custody and maximum child support. She'd been planning to use the kids as weapons in her divorce, regardless of what was best for them. I photographed everything, copied what I could, and organized it all into neat files. Rachel walked me through the legal implications of each discovery during our nightly phone calls. "This is bigger than just your marriage," she said after I'd filled her in on the financial fraud. "If Patricia has been forging signatures and taking out loans without Mark's knowledge, that's serious criminal behavior. The gambling debts to loan sharks put the entire family in potential physical danger." Meanwhile, the kids were having the time of their lives with their temporary guardians, and the contrast was heartbreaking. David sent me videos of Tyler laughing and playing in ways I'd never seen before. The kid was like a different person when he wasn't constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting off his mother's temper or grandmother's criticism. Linda and George sent me daily updates on Madison and Emma that brought tears to my eyes. These little girls, who'd been labeled as difficult and problems by their own family, were flourishing under consistent, loving care. They were sleeping through the night for the first time in years. They were eating vegetables without tantrums. They were playing nicely together instead of constantly fighting for attention. "Emma hasn't had a single meltdown since she's been here," Linda told me during one of our calls. "We give her choices, we stick to routines, and we actually pay attention to her when she tries to communicate. She's just been frustrated and overwhelmed, not behaviorally disturbed like Amanda claimed." It became clear that the children's behavioral problems were actually normal responses to a chaotic, unstable environment where the adults were too wrapped up in their own drama to provide consistent parenting. This realization fueled my determination to make sure the kids stayed where they were thriving, even after the adults returned from their vacation. I spent hours on the phone with David's attorney, providing documentation of Amanda's neglect and manipulation. I shared the evidence of her affair, her financial deception, and her plans to use the children as pawns in her divorce. The attorney was building a solid case for David to get primary custody. Steve's parents were working with their own lawyer to establish grandparents' rights, something that would have been impossible while Amanda was actively keeping the girls away from them. Now that they had the opportunity to develop a real relationship with Madison and Emma, they were determined to ensure it continued. I also reached out to the children's teachers and former daycare providers, with David and the grandparents' permission. What I learned was infuriating. Tyler's teachers had been trying to reach Amanda for months about his emotional struggles and academic problems, but she'd been ignoring their calls and emails. Madison's school had attempted to set up meetings about her bullying behavior, but Amanda had been defensive and hostile, blaming everyone but her daughter. Emma's former daycare had bent over backwards trying to work with Amanda to address Emma's aggression, offering additional support and resources. Amanda had rejected all help and simply moved Emma to a different daycare each time there were problems, never addressing the underlying issues. These professionals were relieved to finally work with adults who were receptive to helping the children. Tyler's grades improved dramatically in just 2 weeks with David providing homework support and structure. Madison was learning conflict resolution skills with Steve's parents' patient guidance. Emma was expressing her emotions with words instead of violence when given proper attention and boundaries. During the second week of my liberation, I made another decision that would have long-term consequences for everyone involved. I called Adult Protective Services. You see, I'd realized that Robert, my father-in-law, was also a victim in this situation. Patricia controlled all the finances, made all the decisions, and had systematically isolated him from friends and family over the years. At 60, Robert was showing signs of early cognitive decline that Patricia was exploiting. I'd found medical bills indicating that Robert had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia months earlier, but Patricia had hidden this from the family. She'd been using his confusion to get him to sign documents he didn't understand, including power of attorney papers that gave her complete control over his assets and medical decisions. The APS caseworker who came to evaluate the situation was appalled by what I showed her. Patricia's financial exploitation of her husband, combined with her isolation tactics and medical neglect, constituted elder abuse. They opened an investigation immediately. By the time the family returned from their cruise, I had built a comprehensive case that would protect everyone who needed protecting and hold accountable those who had been causing harm. But I wasn't done gathering evidence. During my final week alone, I tackled the basement and attic, spaces I'd never been allowed to explore because Patricia claimed they were too dangerous and full of family heirlooms. What I found in the basement was a hoarder's paradise of shopping bags, boxes of unused purchases, and financial documents dating back decades. Patricia's spending problem wasn't new, it was a long-standing addiction that had been escalating over time. The attic was even more revealing. I found love letters between Patricia and a man named Richard, dated from just 2 years ago. Patricia had been having her own affair, something that would be very relevant in divorce proceedings between her and Robert. More shocking were the documents I found in an old trunk, adoption papers for Amanda. Amanda, who'd been told her entire life that she was Patricia's biological daughter, had actually been adopted as a baby. Patricia had been lying to her for over 30 years, and Robert wasn't actually Amanda's biological father. This explained so much about the family dynamics I'd observed. Amanda's desperate need for Patricia's approval, Patricia's ability to manipulate Amanda so completely, the way Robert always seemed slightly detached from Amanda compared to his relationship with Mark. I photographed these documents as well, though I wasn't sure how or if I'd ever use this information. It felt too cruel to expose something that would devastate Amanda, even given everything she'd done to me. As my 3 weeks of freedom came to an end, I spent my final days preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. I coordinated with all the relevant attorneys, social workers, and family members. Everyone knew their role in what was about to unfold. I'd also taken care of practical matters. I'd had the locks changed on my new apartment, set up a security system, and arranged for a friend to stay with me for the first few weeks in case Mark or his family tried to retaliate. Rachel had prepared restraining orders that could be filed immediately if needed. Jennifer had documented everything in a way that would hold up in court. The children's new guardians had legal representation to protect their custody arrangements. I was as ready as I could be for the storm that was about to hit. On the Sunday night before their return, I packed my remaining belongings and took one last walk through the house that had been my prison for 3 years. I felt no sadness, only relief and anticipation. I'd spent 21 days methodically dismantling the power structure that had kept me trapped and miserable. I'd given 3 children the chance at healthy, stable relationships with adults who actually prioritized their well-being. I'd protected a vulnerable elderly man from financial exploitation. I'd gathered evidence that would prevent future victims from suffering the same abuse I had endured. Most importantly, I'd proven to myself that I was stronger, smarter, and more capable than they'd ever given me credit for. Remember my sister Rachel, the lawyer? She'd given me some advice about protecting myself legally, which included documenting any evidence of the family's treatment of me. So I started taking pictures. Pictures of the threatening texts Amanda had sent me over the years. Screenshots of the group chat where they regularly talked about me like I was hired help. Photos of Patricia's financial documents that showed she'd been using the household expense account, which Mark and I contributed to buy personal luxury items. But the real goldmine was Amanda's diary. I probably shouldn't have read it, but honestly, after being slapped and threatened, I was past caring about privacy. And what I found was explosive. Amanda had been having an affair with her personal trainer, Marcus, for over 8 months. She was planning to leave Steve but wanted to wait until she could figure out how to keep the house and get maximum alimony. She'd even been taking money from the joint account she shared with Steve and hiding it in a separate account. More interesting, she'd been lying to everyone about the kids' behavior problems. Madison had been suspended from school twice for bullying other children, and Emma had been kicked out of 2 different daycares for biting and hitting. But Amanda had been telling everyone, including Steve, that the kids were angels and any problems were the fault of incompetent teachers and jealous parents. Patricia's financial documents were equally revealing. She'd been secretly taking out loans against the house that was supposed to be the family inheritance, to fund her shopping habits and maintain her lifestyle. The family was actually in significant debt, something Mark had no idea about. I documented everything, photographed every relevant page, and sent copies to Rachel for safekeeping. Meanwhile, the kids were having the time of their lives with their respective fathers and grandparents. David sent me daily photos of Tyler learning to fish, playing baseball, and generally being a happy, well-behaved kid when he wasn't being constantly spoiled and enabled. Linda sent pictures of the girls baking cookies, gardening, and having tea parties, activities they'd never been allowed to do at home because Patricia thought they were too messy. The best part? All 3 kids were learning rules and boundaries for the first time in their lives. David had Tyler doing age-appropriate chores and homework. Linda and George had the girls on a proper bedtime schedule and were teaching them to clean up after themselves. 1 week into the vacation, I got my first angry call. It was Patricia, calling from the cruise ship. "Jessica, what is the meaning of this? David called Amanda and said he has Tyler. You were supposed to be watching him." I was sitting on the back patio, sipping a margarita and reading a book in the peaceful silence. "I'm taking care of the children," I said calmly. I made the decision that Tyler needed to spend time with his father, and Madison and Emma needed to get to know their paternal grandparents. "They're all very happy." "You had no right," Patricia shrieked. "Bring them back immediately." "Actually, Patricia, I had every right. You left them in my care and told me I was responsible for them. I'm making parenting decisions based on what I think is best for each child. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said cheerfully. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about how you abandoned 3 minor children with a non-family member for 3 weeks while making yourselves unreachable. There was a long pause. We'll deal with this when we get back, she said finally. I'm looking forward to it, I replied, and hung up. That night, Amanda called, absolutely hysterical. You bitch. You've destroyed everything. David is petitioning for full custody. Steve's parents are talking about grandparents' rights. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, I said. That you abandoned your children to go on vacation and left them with someone you regularly threaten to kick out of the house. You're going to pay for this. She screamed. When you get back, we're going to have a very interesting conversation, I interrupted. Especially about your relationship with Marcus. Dead silence. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice had lost all its fire. Sure you don't. Enjoy the rest of your cruise, Amanda. Take lots of pictures, they might be some of your last happy memories for a while. I hung up and poured myself another margarita. The remaining week and a half was pure bliss. I had the house professionally cleaned from top to bottom, my treat to myself. I organized my belongings and started packing things I'd want to keep, because I had a feeling I wouldn't be staying in this house much longer. I also met with a divorce attorney recommended by Rachel. After 3 years of being treated like a servant, physically assaulted by my mother-in-law, and then completely unsupported by my husband, I was done with this marriage. The attorney was optimistic about my case, especially with all the documentation I'd gathered. Most importantly, I started looking for my own apartment. I found a beautiful 1-bedroom place downtown, close to my work, in a building with excellent security. I put down a deposit and arranged to move in the day after the family returned from their cruise. The kids were thriving with their temporary guardians. Tyler had gained confidence and was doing better in school. Madison and Emma were learning social skills and basic manners they'd never been taught at home. Everyone was happier. 3 weeks to the day after they'd left, the family returned from their cruise. I was sitting in the living room, fully dressed and ready to go, with my suitcases packed by the door. I'd taken only what belonged to me personally: clothes, books, my laptop, and a few sentimental items. Everything else could stay in their precious family house. They walked in looking tanned and relaxed, but their expressions quickly changed when they saw my luggage and realized how quiet the house was. Where are the children? Patricia demanded immediately. Safe and happy with people who actually love them, I replied calmly. Mark looked around confused. Jess, what's going on? Where's your stuff? I'm moving out, I said simply. Today, actually. I've got movers coming in an hour. You can't just leave. Amanda shrieked. We had a deal. We had a deal, I agreed. I would take care of the children, and if anything happened to them, I'd be out of the house. Well, something did happen to them. They experienced what it's like to have responsible, caring adults in their lives who set boundaries and show them genuine affection. And now I'm out of the house. Deal fulfilled. Patricia's face was turning purple. You call those children back here right now. I can't do that, I said, standing up and checking my phone. You see, Tyler is with his father, who now has emergency custody pending a full hearing. Madison and Emma are with Steve's parents, who are filing for grandparents' rights. All completely legal, all in the children's best interests. Steve, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. My parents have the girls? But Amanda has said a lot of things that aren't true, I interrupted, pulling out a folder. For instance, she's been telling you that the girls are perfect angels and any problems are everyone else's fault. But Madison has been suspended twice for bullying, and Emma has been kicked out of 2 daycares for violent behavior. It's all documented here. I handed Steve copies of the school reports and daycare incident forms that I'd found in Amanda's room. Also, I continued, turning back to Amanda, Marcus says hi. He's been wondering why you haven't texted him back in 3 weeks. Amanda went white as a sheet. Steve looked confused. Who's Marcus? Amanda's personal trainer, I said helpfully. And her boyfriend for the past 8 months. It's all in her diary, which she conveniently left unlocked in her bedroom. The room erupted. Steve started yelling at Amanda, who was trying to deny everything while simultaneously calling me every name in the book. Patricia was screaming about invasion of privacy and lawsuits. Robert was trying to get everyone to calm down. Mark was just standing there looking shell-shocked. Through all the chaos, I heard the doorbell ring. Oh, that'll be the movers, I said cheerfully, walking to the front door. As the moving crew started loading my belongings into their truck, I turned back to address the family one final time. Patricia, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the shouting, you should probably check your finances. Those loans you've been taking against the house are coming due soon, and the interest rates are about to adjust upward. You might want to cut back on the shopping trips. Patricia's face went from purple to gray in about 2 seconds. Mark, I continued, my attorney will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Given the circumstances, including your mother's assault on me and your complete failure to protect your wife, this should be fairly straightforward. Mark finally found his voice. Jess, wait, we can work this out. You don't have to leave like this. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. Work this out? Mark, your mother slapped me across the face, and you said I deserved it. Then you all threatened to kick me out of my home if I didn't agree to free babysitting for 3 weeks. There's nothing to work out. This marriage was over the moment you chose them over me. But I love you, he said weakly. No, you don't, I replied sadly. You love the idea of having a wife who'll take care of everyone and ask for nothing in return. But I'm not that person anymore. I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Amanda? You might want to check your bank accounts. Marcus has been asking some very interesting questions about your finances. Something about investments you promised him? Amanda's expression told me I'd hit another bullseye. Apparently, she'd been funding her affair with family money and making promises she couldn't keep. As I walked out of that house for the last time, I could hear the chaos continuing behind me. Steve was demanding to see Amanda's bank statements, Patricia was frantically calling what I assumed was her financial advisor, and Amanda was crying hysterically. Mark followed me to the moving truck, still trying to convince me to stay, but his heart wasn't really in it. I think even he could see that this situation was beyond repair. The movers finished loading my things, and I got into my car to follow them to my new apartment. As I drove away, I saw Patricia through the front window on her phone, gesturing wildly at what appeared to be bank statements spread across the dining room table. That was 6 months ago. The aftermath was spectacular. David got primary custody of Tyler after Amanda failed to show up for 2 court hearings. She was dealing with her own legal issues. Tyler is thriving with his father and has asked to change his last name to match David's. Steve divorced Amanda and got joint custody of Madison and Emma. The girls are doing much better with structure and consistent parenting between Steve and his parents. They're both in therapy to work through the behavioral issues that were never addressed before. Amanda lost the house in the divorce and had to move in with a friend. She's working as a waitress while trying to pay back the money she stole from Steve and the debts she accumulated funding her affair with Marcus, who, surprise surprise, disappeared the moment the money dried up. Patricia and Robert had to sell the family house to pay off the loans Patricia had taken against it. They're now living in a small condo and are barely speaking to each other. Patricia blames everyone but herself for the financial mess. Mark tried to reconcile with me for about 3 months, sending flowers and emails about how sorry he was. He even showed up at my apartment a few times until I threatened to call the police. Our divorce was finalized 2 months ago. He's living in a studio apartment across town and, from what I hear through mutual friends, is finally starting to understand how toxic his family dynamic was. As for me? I'm thriving. I got a promotion at work because, without the constant stress of dealing with my in-laws, my performance improved dramatically. I'm dating a wonderful man named Chris who treats me like an equal partner and whose family welcomed me with open arms from day one. I'm seeing a therapist to work through some of the emotional damage from my marriage, and I've never been happier. The kids are all doing well. Tyler sends me birthday cards. David encourages him to maintain positive relationships with people who cared about him. Madison and Emma occasionally send me drawings through Steve, who's become a much better father now that he's not constantly undermined by Amanda. Sometimes I run into people from Mark's extended family around town. They always ask what happened, why I left such a good family. I just smile and say that sometimes people show you who they really are, and it's important to believe them. The truth is, I don't regret a single thing I did. They treated me terribly for years, and when they pushed me too far, I pushed back. I used their own weapons against them, their secrets, their lies, their hypocrisies. I gave those children what they actually needed, loving, stable caregivers, instead of what their parents wanted, free babysitting. Everyone in that family is ultimately better off now, even if they don't realize it yet. The kids have stable, loving homes. Steve is free from Amanda's manipulation and lies. Mark is finally seeing his family clearly for the first time in his life. Even Patricia and Robert are being forced to confront their financial irresponsibility. And me? I learned that I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I deserve better than being treated like hired help in my own marriage. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations, it's simply refusing to accept unacceptable behavior and walking away. They thought they had me trapped, that I had no choice but to accept their treatment because I needed them. They were wrong. I had choices. I made them. And now I'm living my best life while they're dealing with the consequences of theirs. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. But I have to admit, seeing their faces when they realized I'd outplayed them at their own game, that was pretty satisfying too. Reddit, the moral of this story is simple: don't mistake kindness for weakness, and don't assume that just because someone has been accepting poor treatment that they'll continue to do so forever. Everyone has a breaking point. Mine happened to come with a very detailed plan and a sister who's an excellent attorney. Update: a few people have asked about legal consequences for what I did. Rachel, my sister, helped me document everything properly and made sure I stayed within legal boundaries. My actions regarding the children were based on legitimate welfare concerns that I documented and reported through proper channels. While reading Amanda's diary was ethically questionable, I was living in the house as a family member, and the evidence I gathered was never the primary basis for any legal decisions. It simply corroborated other evidence that was obtained legally. The financial documents I photographed were household records that I had legitimate access to as a contributing member of the household, and the elder abuse situation with Robert made documenting Patricia's exploitation a matter of protecting a vulnerable adult. The key was documentation and having proper legal advice before taking any action. I can't stress enough how important it was to have Rachel guiding me through the process. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire.